Welcome everybody. Today is the 29th of September 2025. Today is Monday, so we are doing our weekly roundup. This is my channel, Fretboard Refugee. My name is Bill. We are going to be going over what I've been working on for the last week and what's coming up later this week on this channel. Wanted to thank everybody who's been watching my channel, especially my new blues content. I'm going to keep going with that, more on that later. But all right, this week we are going to be doing an alternate tuning Tuesday tomorrow about open G tuning, where it comes from, what it's good for, how it's been used in and out of the blues tradition, and what you can do in open G that you can't necessarily do in other tunings. Namely, it's a very popular tuning for playing slide, and we're going to talk a little about that. Theory Thursday, I haven't decided exactly what we're going to cover yet, but my FAQ, beginner's FAQ on fingerstyle blues as a style was kind of a big success. So I'm going to start, I really enjoyed doing that, and it seems like a lot of people enjoyed watching it. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to add a show to the rotation. I haven't picked a regular day yet. I don't even know if it's going to be a weekly thing or a whenever I feel like it thing. I don't know if it's going to be a long format like this or like my other blues FAQ episode, or if it's going to be kind of a short format throughout the week. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. For my first one, I'm going to talk a little bit about playing slide, like what the basics of slide are. And I don't know when I'm going to record that yet. I might even do it later today, depending on how my day goes and what else comes up. So keep an eye open for that. So this week I've been working on a lot of the same tunes you've been hearing, a lot of the Mississippi John Hurt tunes. I'm continuing to work on Spike Driver Blues, which is a 1-chord vamp in G. Kind of depends on this alternating bass. That's kind of the signature riff, so to speak, in Spike Driver Blues. I've been also working on, since I laid my burden down, a tune that a lot of people have done, a traditional spiritual, but I've been working on an arrangement that is in the style of Mississippi John Hurt, and he has certainly performed it. I found this kind of challenging because very hard for me to hit those C chords clean. I don't know why. I have no problem playing a C chord when I'm strumming it, but a great deal of fingerstyle blues and ragtime is kind of built on this kind of expanded C chord here, where you have the 3rd fret on the low 2 strings, and you kind of use both of those over the course of your alternate bass. I've been working on getting that cleaner because it really sounds good if you nail it, but a lot of times you're picking up notes down here because you want to get the 9th or the 7th of the C, or even kind of have a moment where you're in G. And then you got to get this finger back up here to cover this A string. And what tends to happen to me is I tend to migrate further down, closer to the 2nd fret, to the point where I end up with some buzz or some muting. So that's something I've been working a lot on, just working on in detail. Been working on a Mississippi John Hurt version of C.C. Rider, which is kind of unconventional format-wise. It's got kind of built on an A to G, or I'm sorry, an A to D transition within one measure here. And it is played with an alternate bass, and kind of does A, D, and G. So it doesn't really follow the traditional 12-bar blues format. It's kind of chordally a little different, but notice something interesting that I'm going to go into more detail about later. There's this kind of figure in the G portion of the song, where you're kind of doing this sort of move here, where you're that riff, that G riff there that constitutes the G portions of this song, is also pretty central to another Mississippi John Hurt song called Shake That Thing, where, again, it's this over and over again throughout the song. This So that comes up again and again in his music, and that's another tune I'm working on, Shake That Thing, which, much like Spike Driver Blues, is all in G. It is kind of a vamp on the G chord. We're going to talk a little bit more about that vamp structure and call and response and where it comes from later. We'll circle around to that. I've been working also on that David Hamburger vamp in E, which you've heard me play a few times by now, but it's this where that is the call and the response is some variant of so we're going to talk a little bit more about that structure and where it comes up in the blues and how it works and where it comes from. We'll get to that in a minute. I've been really focused on this fingerstyle blues stuff lately. One more tune that I've been playing a lot is Mojo Hand by Lightnin' Hopkins. And this is kind of a Texas blues. It's a little more monotonic. Pretty much always predicated on a shuffle. So it's not truly monotonic, but it's not truly alternating either. So it's just like a shuffle riff that you play on an electric guitar if you were playing the blues, where this is your E, which is your one chord in this case. We are talking about a 12 bar where working on getting that pick accuracy, not just with my bare thumb, but with a variety of different thumb picks that I have on hand. I have found the ones with a shorter pick portion, like this guy right here, to be a little easier to be accurate with. Keeps you closer to the strings. So you can go to your A. Sloppy right now. I was doing it better earlier. And your B7, you kind of get into more of a almost Delta blues style thing where you're fingering the chord, but you're hitting the bass note, and you're kind of brushing the bottom strings of the chord. And sometimes you're doing that in sync, and sometimes you're doing that alternately. It's a little tricky to get down, and it's something I'm excited to get down, and it's going to take me a minute. Good thing it's fun to play. I've been spending a lot more time lately with the electric because I've found myself getting maybe a little too focused on the fingerstyle stuff to the point that it's limiting my ability to function with a pick. So, bear with me a second as I get my trying to keep this quiet enough that I'm not getting feedback and overwhelming my voice, but you can still hear it. Doing a lot of work with just basic shuffle riffs. It's a good way to practice picking accuracy. It's a good way to practice string muting. Sort of thing. Let me okay, that's a pretty good tone that I can use for this. Now you've seen a couple things I've worked on with this in the past. You've seen my rumba riff in G, for instance. That sort of goes like this. Screwed that up, but you know, that is a wonderful little movable shape. You can take that and you can really put it in any key you want. You want to do the same thing in A, just move it up. You want to do it in B, just move it up further. Very movable, very cool. There's also different kinds of shuffle riffs that are pretty standard in the blues. There's this sort of thing right here. Where that's your 1, and then when you get to your 2, when you get to your 4, it's kind of... And then, you know, much like any other shuffle riff, you just move it up a couple frets and you get to your 5 chord. So move it back down to get to your 4, and so on. So that's pretty repeatable, but I'm also kind of putting together other things that are movable licks that you can just sort of treat as a shuffle riff. This sort of thing right here, for instance. So, kind of just start. And then when you get to your 4, you just move it down, move it a string higher, like so. That one gets a little confusing because the scale shape changes when you get down to that low string, so it changes a little bit. But there's also just a riff followed by a chromatic run that you can do, which is kind of cool. So this sort of thing. Where that's your 1. That's your 4. And this would be your 5. You can just play a whole 12-bar blues like that. So I've been trying to like use everything that I encounter as a 12-bar blues, see if it's movable. If it's closed position, it's always going to be movable. Figure out what key you're working in. Move it, you know, you can just move it down, or I'm sorry, higher one set of strings towards the ground, but higher in pitch. And then you've got your 4 chord. You take that same structure, you shuffle it 2 frets closer to the body of the guitar, you got your 5 chord. So that's a 1, 4, 5 you can get from anywhere. And it doesn't even have to be a riff you learned anywhere. It can be something you've totally made up for whatever reason, and it will still function as a 12-bar blues, even if it doesn't sound too good. Like, let's say you wanted to do this for whatever reason. If for whatever reason that is your 1 chord, then that would be your 4, and this would be your 5. You can treat that as a 12-bar blues. That is kind of just a way I've been making myself practice more with a pick, making myself practice stuff that's less chordal and more riffy. And I'll get into why I'm doing that in a few minutes, but that's the basics of what I'm playing. The thing I'm working on for the week, and this is why I brought that up, is these kind of riffs and licks that repeat, that you find in more than one song. And especially when you're doing a deep dive into one artist's work, like Mississippi John Hurt. Now I knew that if I learned a couple songs in G, they would have the same sort of motifs, like the kind of basic spike driver motif here, this kind of thing. That obviously comes up whenever he's playing in G, that sort of thing, because this is always going to be your kind of seventh in G. So that's always going to come up. That's always going to be an important note. It's always going to be emphasized in a way. But what I wasn't ready for, and what should have been obvious to me, is that a lot of the same measures, like you can take a bar, this bar right here, that exact same bar repeats throughout Shake That Thing. It repeats throughout CC Rider as well. So songs in totally different keys, if they involve a G at all, there's going to be a motif either like that or like the one in Spike Driver Blues, because there's only so many notes that are fair game. So this crazy thing happens. You're learning fingerstyle blues, you see this mess of individual notes on strings, and you're like, I'll never learn this. And eventually you've learned that one song, and it might take months. Like I've been working on Spike Driver Blues for a minute, and then you'll look at another song and you'll be like, I got to do all that over again. But really you don't, because you've learned this one motif for, Shake That Thing, for instance, this. Oop, there we go. And you already know that. That happens, I think, 4 times in Shake That Thing, that exact same measure. And sure enough, that measure happens again a couple times in CC Rider. So you already know 2 measures of CC Rider. This is why learning licks specifically and learning principles generally, kind of those 2 ends of the spectrum kind of combine in a way that's very valuable. I have had a lot of moments of, oh, I recognize this, I've played this before, which I think will accelerate my learning process, which I'm excited about. Musical concept of the week, which is kind of going to function as my learning concept here, is the notion of call and response. This is a staple in blues, like when you're playing these 1-chord vamps, these tunes like Spike Driver Blues, where everything you're doing is either a G or a G7. It seems rather monotonous as you're playing it, but if you think about where these tunes came from, Reverend Robert Jones, who is a kind of a historian of blues music, African-American folk music, he talks about the origin of these things in work songs. This entire idea that these things were not originally melodic by nature. The melody came later. The origin of something like Spike Driver Blues or any of the other variants of the John Henry story that have been set to music, it comes from what John Henry, if there was such a person, and there's evidence he is, that's a whole other conversation. This historical person was on a prison work gang, and he was, forced to labor with a hammer, driving steel spikes to build railroad. And a lot of the men on these crews died horrible deaths because they were working next to these steam drills. These steam drills would stir up silica dust from the ground. They would inhale it. It would sort of clog their lungs and lead to sort of the same thing that happened to coal miners, like black lung, where you would have an inability to get oxygen into your lungs increasingly over time, and you'd have degeneration of your very ability to function because you couldn't actually get air past all the junk that was in your lungs. But why are work songs associated with that? Well, because you're doing a rhythmic task. You're driving steel into the ground. If you're just doing that haphazardly or in short bursts, you're not going to be able to do it for 8 to 12 hours or however long they make you do it. The same goes for agricultural labor. A lot of these songs were rhythmic chants that were used in the field to make work easier for a group of men working together. This is not the only time and place in history that we see this emerging. The entire genre of sea shanties that was briefly and inexplicably popular like 5 years ago during the pandemic. The origin of these songs, and it's been romanticized somewhat. There's some evidence that they actually emerged later than people want them to have, but when you're hauling up a giant steel anchor, no one man's going to do that by himself. A group of men is going to turn a capstan together, and that goes a lot smoother if they're not all just straining at their own pace, but if they kind of take a breath and then all heave at once, all push on their particular spoke of the capstan at the same time. That's how you actually make progress, dragging like a ton of steel off the bottom of the ocean. So the way they would do that is they would have one man chanting a cadence, and the guys would kind of sing between pushes in a way to kind of force them to breathe in unison, so they're not just standing there huffing and puffing. It would make them more efficient as a crew. It would make everybody push at the same time. It would make it harder for anybody to slack off and let somebody else do the work. It's kind of a way that groups of people doing hard work have often coordinated and regulated their efforts to be something sustainable and meaningful. And that, when it entered the musical tradition, became the call and response that we see in the blues. So often in tunes that are something like the 12-bar blues is going to be predicated on tension and release in musical theory, kind of pop musical theory terms. So you're on your one chord. That feels like home. So you have 4 bars of your one chord, then a couple bars of your 4 chord, which builds a little bit of tension, and that tension releases back to the 1 chord. Then you go as far as you can get from your 1 chord to your 5 chord. Back through the 4, and back to the 1. So the reason the 5 chords as far as you can get, really there's only like, 12 or so, depending whether you count the octave or not. There's like 12 possible tones, right? So you got, if you're in E, you've got, chromatically speaking, you've got E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then you're back at E. So if this is E, how far can we get from E before we're going back towards E? Well, that's our 4, right? So that's our A. Here's our B, which is even further from E. But once we go to C, we're kind of getting closer to hitting E again. So this is as far as you can get from E within the octave. So that is the point of greatest tension. So 1, 1, 4, 4, 1, 1, 5, 4, 1, 1. That's the structure of 12-bar blues, right? That's predicated on tension and release, but there's other kinds of tension that something can be predicated on. Let's go back to our David Hamburger vamp here. So this is our bass, then our call, and this is our response to that call. There's our call again. So those are both E. That's all within the E minor pentatonic scale, right? Those are all things that you would hear within an E chord bar of fingerstyle blues. Those are all riffs you would hear over an E chord if somebody's soloing on blues. So there's really no tonal distance, but there is a huge pitch difference because you're jumping between your call, which is up here, on your low E, and your response, which is going to be built around your high E. And that is where the tension comes from in a call and response blues. And these are not mutually exclusive. You can have a call and response within a 12-bar blues, but what's cool about call and response is it works within a vamp in one chord. It works within one pitch range. There's differences. The rhythm becomes more important. And that's where it relates to the work song tradition, which I thought that was a pretty cool insight. And shout out to Reverend Robert Jones for pointing that out and articulating it so beautifully. That is kind of where I'm at this week. I'm trying to expand my blues horizon and not get too focused on just the fingerstyle stuff, and I'm trying to relate it to the electric stuff as well, kind of see how those worlds join together. The instrument for the week is going to be my electric, which I just showed you. I've explained what that is and how it works before, and why I picked that particular one, so I won't go into that here. My piece of gear for the week is the new strings that I put on this guy. These are the Martin Retro custom light, so 11 gauge for the high E string. Strings that are made of Monel, which is a nickel alloy that was first used during World War II because the copper that's normally used to make like an 80-20 bronze string was in short supply. So Monel, I believe, uses more nickel, which is cheaper and easier to get. It has a very, well, retro sound, I think. I love the way these sound. I love the way they feel. They are not coated, but they are not really too loud. They don't have that nails on the chalkboard sound, even though they're not broken in yet. They are also unusually silver color compared to other guitar strings. I just kind of like the look and the vibe of them. So that's what I've been enjoying lately. Shout out for the week is the Reverend Robert Jones, who is kind of an historian of blues. I believe I heard his explanation of work songs on a YouTube video that was an advertisement for True Fire. I'll try to track down that link and add it to the description here later. So that's what I've got going this week. Please look forward to that Open G show tomorrow and that slideshow and any other kind of episodic blues topics I come up with throughout the week. I'm going to do that in a show that I think I'm going to call like Beginner at the Crossroads or something, kind of a reference to the whole Robert Johnson Crossroads mythos. And I'll explain that more when I debut that show. We'll get into that whole mythology of the crossroads and the soul selling and the devil's note and the kind of demonic symbolism that exists around the blues, which is pretty interesting stuff. So thank you very much for watching. We'll see you later.